In today's video we are going to discuss 401k's and why they are a great wealth building tool even if you plan on retiring early or want to be financially independent early. I used to believe that when your money went into a 401k it was locked up until regular retirement age anyway. Turns out that is not the case. So throughout the video we are just going to make sure that any other young professionals out there who are starting their career or have recently started their career know exactly what they need to in order to use this tool effectively. I'm going to be diving in on the tablet to do some writing and drawing to hopefully make this video more interesting than the ones I've done in the past where it's just me talking in front of the camera. All you can see is my head. I know that's not a very pretty picture, so we'll spend some time doing some writing here. So we touched on why. It's really, the point of this video is just to make sure that no one writes off a 401k too early based on some of the typical advice that they may have heard. The main reason 401k's are a very good wealth building tool is the employer match. There's also the IRS limits. We're going to test my handwriting today. It's never been very good, so hopefully this is legible. Oh, other pros. Of course, it's tax advantaged. You probably already know that one. We won't really spend much time talking about specifics about taxes in this video. Tax advantage. And then some of the cons are the rules. Because it's a tax advantaged account, the IRS puts rules on it. That's typically like age restrictions and stuff. And then some of your investment choices. How do you spell that? No, that's not right. Bear with me. Spelling was never my strong suit. Choices. And then the vesting schedule. That's one that's not often talked about either. So we will make sure it's covered and you know exactly what's going on. So starting with an example of the match, just how to read it. So if you're new to this and just starting out, it can be a little bit confusing jargon, so I'll just do a quick example or two. First one's pretty simple. It would say something like, your employer's documentation would say, we match 50% up to 10% of your salary. So the 10% is your salary, 50% is what they do. Let's say you make $60,000 a year. That's a zero. That's $60,000 a year. So you have to put in 10% or $6,000 and they will match 50% of your contribution, which is $3,000 in this case, for a grand total of $9,000 put into your 401k that year. Now, 50% return on your money is essentially what's happening here, and that is the best return you will ever get in your life. Just for reference, the S&P 500 index, the top 500 companies in the United States, pre-inflation, do like something like 11 or 12-ish% return, depending on where you look. So it's guaranteed. It's just ridiculous that there's some people that call 401k's a scam or some people that don't do them. It's basically like getting a small bonus on top of your salary. So for this example, it's another $3,000 that this person got that they had no way of getting otherwise. So the second example is a little more complicated. This is actually mine from my most recent engineering job. And just to make the numbers easier, I'm going to use 100,000 as the salary, because ones and zeros are so much easier to work with. So the 100% here is the employer and the 50% is the employer. I'm the 3 and the 2. So 3% of 100k would be a $3,000 contribution, and then they'll match that one at 100%, so another $3,000. Then if I do another 2% of my salary, which is $2,000, they'll match 50% of that, which is just half at $1,000. So what do we have here so far? We have $5,000 that I've put in and $4,000 that they've put in. So it's almost like getting, oh, what is that? Well, it's almost like they could have said, if you put in 5%, we'll match 80% of that. Is that what's happening? essentially. Why do they insist on having these tiers? I don't know, but if you see one like that, hopefully this helps you learn how to calculate it. Funny thing is, this actually comes out to $9,000 again, which I did not plan, but just a happy coincidence, I guess. So going back up to our list here, IRS limits, another pro of the 401k is it's the largest bucket as far as tax advantaged accounts go. So in 2025, if you research it, if you look it up, you'll probably find that the limit is 500,000. I almost said 500,000. 23,500. That means this is actually the amount that you can put in from your paycheck deductions. The funny thing is, though it doesn't get mentioned as often, is that the real top limit is actually $70,000 this year. So this $70,000 is what you put in and what your employer puts in, and then in very rare cases, if you have boatloads of money, there's something called a mega backdoor Roth, which is, you may have heard of, but we won't dive into it in this video, otherwise it'll get way too long. But there's the $23,500 of deductions from your paycheck that you can put in. Those are tax advantaged. It's usually pre-tax. Then your employer will put in their match on top of that, and then it's possible that you could choose to keep putting more money in, up to a combined total of $70,000, which very few people actually do. But this $23,500 would be compared to something like a IRA, an individual retirement account. The limit right now on that is $7,000. So you have more tax sheltering capability if you use the 401k. Okay, so these last two things that we'll just briefly touch on are the choices and the vesting. I need to jump over to sharing my main computer screen here so I can actually show you my real 401k investment options. We're back. This right here is what you'd see if you were just signing up for a 401k for the first time, whether it's actually your first job or you've changed jobs and you're signing up with a new employer. And here's a seemingly long list of things you could choose to invest yourself in. It's a little bit misleading because these target date funds at the bottom are all essentially the same exact thing. Now a target date fund is basically a set it and forget it option that they give you, where as you age, the portfolio, the fund is supposed to become less and less risky. That's what these blue and green bars are. So like for someone who's retiring in a few years in 2030, they're almost half and half between stocks and bonds. If you don't know what the difference between stocks and bonds, we'll have to probably talk about that in a different video. But the point is, if your retirement date is further away, they keep you more in stocks because those have more growth but a little bit more risk and volatility. And as you get closer, they dial it back so that your balance doesn't fluctuate as much as the market changes. The other options are, here's some bonds. You can tell because they're 100% green in this case. Yours won't be blue or green probably, but then there's all these other funds, and you really just want to look at how they've performed historically and how much they cost and try to find an acceptable balance. You can see that I actually use this S&P 500 index because I believe that it gives the best, basically the best performance for the price. And what I mean by the 401k could be a con as far as your choices go. I can buy an S&P 500 index fund somewhere else for, instead of 0.35 as the expense ratio, I think the other place I'm getting it right now is 0.04. It's almost 10 times cheaper. And it's essentially the same exact thing. But it's worth it to pay that 0.35 here because I'm getting the match on it. That will trump basically any difference you'll see in cost between your 401k option and something you can get elsewhere is going to be superseded by the match. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to jump to one other screen that we're going to talk about here, and that's the Oh, I forgot to put one thing on my list. Here, we'll go back. Under rules, we kind of talked about the age. Did we talk about the age yet? Okay, let's do it here. Under rules, the age restriction on a 401k is typically 59 and a half. Why the half? I don't know. And if you take your money out before then, there's supposed to be a 10% penalty. And that's all true, that happens, but there is a way to get around it if you need to. And that's something called a series of substantially equal periodic payments. A very fancy government name. Or sometimes it'll be referred to as 72T. I think that's just the name of like the form or the IRS document that is tied to these payments. So back to the computer screen here. I have a little example calculator pulled up. So here you can see it's called 72T calculator, and all it is basically the IRS says, yeah, you can take some money out of your 401k, but you have to play by our rules. If you start this distribution, you have to tell us how you want it calculated. There's basically 3 options, and you can choose. There's a couple options, but you basically choose how you want it calculated. Some options give you less annual withdrawals, like a lower number, and some give you a higher number. So the example here, I guess, is if you're going for the required minimum distribution method, in this case you get 5,300, but if you're using some of these other fixed amortization or fixed annualization methods, you can see how one gives you more than the other. But the deal is, once you start, you can't stop until you actually hit 59 and a half. Or I think the limit is you have to do it for at least 5 years, but whichever is longer. So if you plan on retiring early, if you access your 401k at age 40, you have to follow the plan until age 59 and a half, no matter what, or otherwise you start paying penalties and stuff again. So why would anyone do that? Well, if you want to be financially independent and access your 401k, and you still have a mortgage, and your mortgage is $20,000 a year, you could try to get $15,000, $20,000 or whatever it ends up being, something like slightly less or equal to your mortgage from your 401k. And then if you know that mortgage is going to run another 20 years, and it's 20 years until you turn 59 and a half, you could just have that withdraw automatically pay your mortgage, essentially. I think that's all we need to say about that one. And there's only one other main thing that I want to talk about, but I'm just going to leave this up on the screen so that I don't have to switch around too much. But jumping back down to our little writing area here, the only one we haven't really touched on is the vesting. And down at the bottom here I have a simple little vesting table. What vesting is, so it might be easiest just to kind of use it in a sentence. If you are 100% vested in your 401k, it means you get to take 100% of your employer match if you quit your job. If you are not 100% vested, you won't get to take 100% of your match with you. What does that mean? It's basically a way that employers try to make you stay and reward employees for being loyal and not pay as much money to unloyal or disloyal employees. So down here, this little schedule I have written out is actually the one for my current job. At 5 years, I have to work there 5 years in order to get 100% of the match vested. So what this basically means is your contributions are always yours. They have to give you 100% of that. But in our example from above, if the match was, let's say you worked here for 2 years and the total match in that time was $8,000. Let's see, let me write 8,000 here. And let's say you worked for 2 years and your contribution, let's see, I'm trying to make sure I use the actual realistic numbers. So that'd be 10,000. Your contribution, or mine in this case, since it's kind of my example, is $10,000. This is always yours. They can't take that from you. The $8,000 is the match that they provided, but they're saying if you leave, shortly after 2 years, you only get 40% of what we matched you. So whatever 40% of 8,000 is, it's less than half. So a little less than 4,000. Let me just do that. I'll grab the calculator real quick so I don't tell you anything wrong. 8,000 times 0.4, 3,200. Oh, okay. You could probably hear me dropping my phone in the background. What did I say? 3,200 is what you would actually take with you of the employer match, and that would get paired with your 10,000. So maybe this is the time to say, I've met people who were worried that if they left their job they wouldn't get to keep any of their 401k money. It's not the case. Usually you get to kind of keep all of it. It just depends on your vesting schedule. I've seen other vesting schedules where it was 100% in 3 years. So if it's anything worse than a 5-year vesting schedule, that's kind of bad. Most employers don't make it take that long. So the funny thing is, even if you have that vesting schedule that's not necessarily in your favor, it's still worth it to do it usually. And I think so what does that really mean? The last thing we need to say is action steps. If you're just starting out, you want to make sure that you are actually using your 401k. Most employers these days, I shouldn't say most, it's getting more popular to actually auto-enroll new employees in their 401ks, and that's great. But if that's you have to make sure that you go in and, so my employer auto-enrolls, I don't need to show you on here, they only auto-enroll up to that 3% portion. If you want that extra 2%, you have to go in and specify that yourself. And if you're auto-enrolled, you have to make sure that they're not just it's not an accident. I almost said accidentally. You have to make sure that they're not just putting it in like a savings account or just holding it in an uninvested account. You have to go in and specify where you want that money invested if you want it to grow with the stock market, which, hint, you do. And then lastly, it's just understand your vesting schedule. If you are potentially leaving your job soon, and you might want to, like if you've been working there 2 years and 10 months, you might just want to wait it out so that you get bumped up into that next tier, because that next tier might be 100%. In my case, it was not. It was whatever, 60. It would have been 60 at 3 years. But don't accidentally sell yourself short by quitting just a hair early. But other than that, I think that's all you really need to know about 401k's right now if you want to use them as a tool to build your wealth. I'm going to force myself to stop there, otherwise I'm just going to ramble on in a very confusing way. So we'll see you in the next video.